Welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right into things today because we are tackling one of the most fascinating and honestly kind of terrifying paradoxes of the modern world. We usually just assume that whoever builds the best artificial intelligence is going to automatically dominate the future, right? But what if having the absolute best technology doesn't actually mean you win? What if the real bottleneck isn't the code itself, but whether or not your society actually lets you use it? Which brings us to a really chilling thought. What if the nation that wins the AI race does it completely in secret? We're so used to tech giants hyping up their latest chatbot releases with these massive, flashy presentations, but what if the ultimate breakthrough in artificial general intelligence, or AGI, isn't announced at all? What if it's treated more like a digital nuclear deterrent, locked away and used quietly behind the scenes to engineer an absolutely unbeatable global advantage? Look at this quote from our source material, because it brilliantly captures the core anxiety that's literally keeping policymakers awake at night. Quote, Google develops AGI and cannot use it. China also develops AGI and keeps it hidden to boost its entire tech industry. It is a highly realistic scenario. Imagine a Western corporate lab like Google developing true AGI, but they're terrified to deploy it because of massive safety risks and antitrust laws. Meanwhile, a state-managed system like China also develops it, keeps it entirely hidden from the public, but plugs it directly into their domestic supply chains and manufacturing base. That is a massive structural asymmetry.
So let's break this down in Section 1, the hidden AI winner.
The dilemma here is pretty stark. First, you've got what we can call the Western trap. If a company builds AGI, it instantly becomes this massive liability machine. Just imagine the sheer volume of lawsuits if an autonomous intelligence crashes a market or rewrites critical code incorrectly. Plus, if a tech monopoly tries to integrate this superintelligence across all its products, antitrust regulators are going to swoop in instantly to break the company up. The result? The AGI gets trapped in a glass box. It's used cautiously in some high-security server room, but remains basically useless to the broader economy. Now contrast that with a centralized, state-directive engine. A centralized government isn't sweating over quarterly shareholder lawsuits, right? They can take that AGI and quietly use it to optimize advanced manufacturing, redesign logistics grids, and totally accelerate material science. It becomes this hidden industrial flywheel, just compounding economic advantages for years before the West can safely uncork its own digital genie. Which leads us to Section 2, the openness catch-22. Here's the thing. You really cannot unring the open source bell. If a lab builds a safe AGI, keeping it a secret is going to trigger a massive public backlash, with people demanding open-weight releases so academics can actually study it. But here is the ultimate catch-22. Providing open access to a system with autonomous, high-level reasoning capabilities is fundamentally the exact same thing as open sourcing a blueprint for a digital weapon. Now, in traditional cybersecurity, security through obscurity is generally seen as a terrible idea. But in frontier AI, keeping those capabilities obscure might literally be the only thing stopping rogue states or syndicates from downloading the model, stripping away its safety guardrails, and using it to design cyber attacks or biological weapons. Of course, secrets in the tech world rarely stay secret forever, but the way a hidden AGI leaks, that determines everything. Let's look at this table. First, you have a noise floor leak, maybe some obscure code on a torrent or a random Reddit rumor. Honestly, that's just going to get ignored as hype, just a standard PR denial, and everyone moves on. For the world to actually wake up, we'd need an economic shock. Think along the lines of an internal model autonomously breaking complex encryption, triggering an absolute Wall Street panic. Or the ultimate worst-case scenario, a containment breach, where the model unauthorizedly escapes its testing sandbox. That creates an immediate, terrifying national security crisis. Without one of those major shocks, a secret AGI just blends right into the daily tech noise. All right, moving to Section 3, from AGI to superintelligence. We need to talk about artificial superintelligence, or ASI. We are no longer talking about a system that can write a decent novel or pass the bar exam. We are talking about an intelligence that outsmarts the collective human race in every single domain by an unbounded margin. If you try the whole hidden AI strategy with an ASI, experts warn you are holding a geopolitical tiger by the tail. AI pioneer Stuart Russell famously pointed out that trying to keep an ASI boxed up in a server room is like trying to keep a human trapped in a cage guarded by hamsters. It is inevitably going to find a psychological, social, or software exploit to break out. So how do we actually make that jump from AGI to superintelligence? Deep tech labs point to 4 escalating pathways. It all starts with recursive self-improvement, where the AI just continuously rewrites its own code way faster than any human ever could.
Then it expands into AI collectives, thousands of AGI agents operating in parallel, collaborating instantly. Throw in brute force scaling through massive expansions in computing power, and finally, algorithmic paradigm shifts. This is where the AI invents entirely new, incomprehensible foundational architectures that go way, way beyond our current neural networks.
Section 4, when AI touches matter. This is where the state-directed model gets truly formidable. Just imagine a centralized AGI connected to millions of humanoid robots via ultra-fast, zero-latency 6G networks. A state-backed system absolutely dominates here because they control the heavy manufacturing supply chains for things like actuators and rare earth magnets. They can roll out national 6G mandates without all the bureaucratic red tape. And crucially, they are totally insulated from the OSHA regulations, liability, and labor friction that would instantly paralyze a Western rollout. In a really strange way, the physical robots act as a protective wrapper for the AGI. You don't need to expose your AGI to the public, you just use it as the invisible brain for millions of machines that perfectly weld chassis and run massive warehouses. Physical reality itself becomes the airlock.
But the West has a very different kind of physical advantage, and that's nanotechnology. This brilliant capability completely flips the heavy manufacturing equation upside down. Nanotech doesn't need million-unit factories or tons of steel. It relies on pure code, elite compute, and molecular self-assembly. An AGI could literally shrink the design loop for novel molecular structures from decades down to mere milliseconds. The West's massive lead in advanced academic research positions them perfectly for this. But there is a major catch, often called the democratization of doom. If you don't need a huge, visible factory to build world-changing materials, control becomes basically impossible. A high-end nanotech lab can literally fit inside a garage. If the AGI's capabilities leak, the blueprint for synthesizing a catastrophic pathogen or a novel toxin can be instantly distributed all across the globe.
So how do we handle this? Section 5, preventing a tech Cold War. Historically, humanity is pretty terrible at cooperating until a major crisis forces our hand. Just look at how the European Union only formed after decades of economic shocks and post-war devastation. But we really cannot wait for a terminal AI crisis to start building diplomacy. The UN, even though it lacks serious enforcement teeth, is structurally vital here. It acts as a neutral, diplomatic landing pad where rival nations can quietly discuss red lines without losing face. Furthermore, it establishes an objective scientific baseline, kind of like a climate panel, but for AI, so policy isn't just driven by hype or paranoia. And critically, it prevents the developing world from being totally excluded and turned into digital colonies of the leading AI superpowers. But governments also need to take active, structural interventions right now to change the incentive game. First, they've got to define critical compute as public infrastructure. Massive server farms shouldn't just be private assets. They need oversight and transparency so nobody can secretly train an AGI in the dark. Second, governments must establish liability safe harbors, supervised sandboxes where corporations can safely test AI in high-impact sectors without the constant fear of instant ruinous lawsuits. And third, we absolutely need international cryptographic verification treaties, kind of like nuclear non-proliferation agreements, making it incredibly difficult for anyone to secretly weaponize these breakthrough systems. Now let's bring this whole scenario back down to earth for a minute. Despite all the talk of tech cold wars and superintelligence, the way AGI actually enters our society might be incredibly boring. It might literally just become the invisible plumbing of the future. Instead of some dramatic sci-fi public awakening, tech giants will probably just use AGI quietly as a background supervisor. It'll sit invisibly behind consumer chatbots, fixing hallucinations, cross-referencing logic, and keeping output safe, all without the company ever announcing, hey, we're using AGI. It will just make everything run better, capturing the market through sheer quality, while the actual superintelligence remains heavily guarded by corporate firewalls. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question. Will we figure out how to share it responsibly or engineer a permanent, high-tech standoff? The technology itself is completely borderless, but our global political structures are fiercely divided. How we choose to bridge that gap over the coming years is, without a doubt, the ultimate high-stakes geopolitical test of our generation. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the invisible infrastructure that is being built right beneath our feet.